So I was just reading a little bit of Songs of Experience by Martin J. Just picked this up today. So I was thinking about experience, and this book is basically about the history of philosophy's encounter with experience, whether you want to say with the word experience or with the experience. Um, it's the history of the West's way of thinking about it. There's no. He mentions in the preface that obviously there's a whole Eastern tradition of we might call it philosophy, we might call it spirituality, religion, whatever, an Eastern collection of thought and a system of thought that attempts to describe and explain and situate ourselves within experience that he's not even touching on at all. But so it's just the Western tradition. But I was reading about Plato, and Plato was obviously um, the originator of this notion of eternal forms that we can know not only in our mind, but they've run through our minds and the structure of the cosmos itself. Um, it was talking about Plato's dislike of drama, poetry, um, comedy. Aristophanes would make plays that made fun of the idea that philosophy was the real truth of existence. Making fun of the disinterested theoretician who sits at his desk and reads books and solves mathematical equations and reflects on what a good action would be and never acts. Aristophanes would poke fun at that, and Plato would just get so angry because these comedies that Aristophanes would write would resonate so well with the masses. People would watch them and be like, "Yeah, it's so true. Fucking Plato is withdrawn and he's a little weird." And Plato would get so angry about this because, as far as he's concerned, these people they're just watching the cave wall and being totally um, deceived by rhetoric and a good show that's not true. But the book talks about this distinction between writing and speech, really, because Plato obviously he had to write to understand himself. He had to go into a room, be alone in a silent place without others, and reflect on his experience by writing down these complex systems of thought and defining words in these dialogues and whatnot. Whereas speech is more fluid, it's more immediate. You can't really plan out what you're going to say before you say it. You just allow one context to lead to the next. And this got me thinking about what the voice is. Because we say even writers have voices, but really, writing is all visual. You're looking at a form on a page. You may hear it in your mind, but what does that mean? I mean, speaking is an action, right? Whereas writing is more of this disinterested reflection. Reflection, notice the visual metaphor. You reflect when you write philosophy. Whereas when you speak, if you reflect before you speak, then what are you really saying? You're not speaking. You're silent. And yet you're hearing these words in your mind somehow. Thoughts are the words you speak only to yourself. Still in a public language, at least if we're going to follow Wittgenstein. No private language, only public languages can be thought. Thoughts are in terms of a system of symbols agreed upon whose meanings are agreed upon by a community. Otherwise, there's no thought, there's no concepts, there's nothing. So all the ego's knowledge is dependent upon others for the knowledge structure, for the hard drive to download the meaning to. The hard drive is the form of the word, the structure, and the meaning is the substance. It's the content of the structure or the form. And these aren't supposed to be physical facts. I mean, obviously, what does this even mean? This is just the way we describe the world. Because we have a language that's structured such that it has first person, second person, and third person um, versions. So those are the three perspectives in which that we can address the other. The other can be addressed in those three ways. There's no in between. And this is limiting because all of a sudden there's this huge gap between what I feel inside and what I see outside. There's a gap between my inner experience and my exterior sensory knowledge. Because how does, like, I see with my eyes another person's skull when I speak to them, and inside the skull there's a brain. And inside the brain there's all these neural connections, and theoretically I could go up there and remove their skull and look at their brain thinking while they are experiencing themselves thinking. Somehow those two perspectives, them experiencing themselves from the inside out and me watching them think from the outside in, somehow those are the same. And yet there's this irreconcilable gap between the two. And that is a dualism, but it's a dualism inherent to our way of understanding. It makes sense to describe it this way. You can't explain away the I. You can't explain away content and meaning and say it all reduces to form.